McGraw-Hill Ascent Audio presents Investing in Fixer-Uppers, Revised Edition, a complete guide to buying low, fixing smart, adding value, and selling or renting high. Second edition. By J. P. Decima with Dan Shea. Narrated by Christopher P. Brown. Publisher's Note. In this audio edition, you will hear references to figures and tables present in the print and e-book formats of the book. Introduction. Starting my house-fixing career in Northern California back in the 1970s seemed like a perfect opportunity at the time. I had no idea back then that one of the worst real estate recessions since the end of World War II was lurking around the corner. I had no way of knowing that interest rates would suddenly shoot up to 22% and completely close the doors on traditional real estate financing. I couldn't have picked a worse time if I had planned it. When interest rates began to climb, nearly all the real estate activity in town came to a screeching halt. Hardly anyone was interested in buying or selling. And yet, looking back now, I realize it was probably a good thing for me that I couldn't predict the future. Otherwise, I would have likely kept on punching a time clock at the telephone company and figuring out how long before I could draw Social Security. I still remember my early struggles. Friends and business associates kept telling me the same thing. Jay, there is absolutely no way you can buy run-down houses today to fix up and expect to make any profits for yourself. Then they'd tell me, to begin with, most banks are not willing to finance real estate today, especially the kind you're buying. Besides that, you won't be able to sell your properties because there's no appreciation anymore. Obviously, that means no future profits. You've got to face reality, Jay. The days of making money in real estate are over. The bubble has finally burst. I remember reading a book by William Nickerson, How to Make a Fortune Today, Starting from Scratch, Simon & Schuster, 1963. In his book, Nickerson says, although opportunities are much greater during boom times, I have come to the conclusion that opportunities are always present, in good times or bad. Anyone who really wants to can make a fortune in real estate. To succeed, one requires only the initiative to start and the determination to keep applying the 3 R's of renovating, refinancing, and reinvesting. Nickerson's words gave me the courage to ignore my critics. Quite often, I've found that things you don't understand too well can end up helping you more than the things you do understand. For example, I didn't understand why it was the wrong time to buy fixer houses, so I kept writing offers and buying those kinds of properties anyway. I didn't understand that borrowing fix-up money at 20% interest was way too expensive, so I borrowed the money and fixed the houses anyway. Nearly everyone told me I couldn't sell the houses because it was such a terrible market for sellers. However, in just 13 months, I sold my Haywood houses, details in Chapter 6, and made a $150,000 profit. Over the years, I have learned that it's far better to be a little bit dumb about things and to act than to be super intelligent and never accomplish anything. It may sound like I'm a little dumb when I tell you this, but I promise you it's true. Good opportunities never disappear. People simply fail to recognize them. Action is the magic ingredient that separates successful people from those who can't figure out what to do. My seminar students are always asking me this question. Do you honestly believe there will always be an opportunity to make big money fixing run-down houses? Let me answer this way. According to the latest government survey conducted by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, the need for decent, affordable rental housing exceeds production by at least 250,000 units annually. Adding to this problem is that more rental houses are deteriorating below habitability standards than are being rehabilitated. Translated, This means that fixing rundown houses is truly a golden opportunity for do-it-yourself real estate investors like me. Indeed, the future is brighter than ever, and there's no end in sight. People often say to me, "Jay, you sure are a lucky devil. You jumped headfirst into real estate investing at exactly the right time. Your timing was perfect." But tell me truthfully, do you still think the same things you've done for yourself can be done by others in today's economy? My answer is a loud and clear yes. Furthermore, as you'll discover by the time you finish this book, the economy and timing have hardly anything to do with fixing houses for profits. Profits will come from adding value and your own personal skills. That's the real beauty of fixing houses. The only limits are your willingness to learn how and, of course, getting started. Beginning with the first chapter, I'll share with you an exciting strategy about making big money. I'll show you how to set yourself up for life financially. You must be willing to learn a few new techniques and develop some special skills. There's no question, I can teach you how, but obviously you must jump in and get the job done. You'll be pleasantly surprised, as I was, to learn that money is not what you need most to be a successful real estate investor. Unless, of course, you're counting the cash expense to buy this book. Forget that right now, because I promise you'll earn it back many times over. To begin with, pay very close attention as you listen to the first chapter. It's there that you'll see that it takes only one property like my Hillcrest property to get your book cost back 1,000 times over. Real estate profits can multiply like rabbits by using leverage, but they seldom get much better than my Hillcrest property. Chapter 1 is important because it shows you that small-time investors can earn big-time profits doing fairly simple fix-up jobs. However, all chapters are important because each one will teach you new and exciting ways to make money. By the time you're done with the book, you should have enough knowledge to start turning ugly duckling properties, like my Hillcrest property, into beautiful swans. When you do, your beautiful swans will start producing those lovely golden eggs I call cash flow. There's one final point I wish to make before I lead you through a money-making education. Do not expect me to tell you if a 10% loan is good or bad, or which bank will loan you money, or even where you should invest in fixer-upper houses. It's my hope you'll be able to tell me the answers by the time you finish listening. What I will show you are techniques and strategies that work anywhere, anytime, with or without bank loans. What you'll learn from me has been working for at least 100 years, and I'll guarantee you it's going to work at least 100 more. I'm a firm believer in the age-old wisdom that argues, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. If you agree, let's get on with our fishing lessons. Part 1. From Handyman to Financial Independence. Chapter 1. Discover the millionaire inside yourself. The sun was barely up when I swung my old blue pickup truck into the parking lot at my local big-box home improvement store. Getting up bright and early to beat the Saturday morning crowd didn't seem to be working all that well. The lines were already backed up outside when I stumbled through the main entrance door. Still, crowded or not, these early morning shoppers are my kind of people. I often call them the home improvement junkies. They're pretty much the guys and gals who love fixing stuff and figuring out what new gizmos to install next. They love to fix things and make improvements around the house. Standing in the checkout line, just kinda gazing around, I couldn't help but wonder how many of these early rising homeowners could be millionaires if they only knew what I know. I'm guessing quite a few, but let me explain. I was 21 years old when I purchased my very first house using the old GI Bill. Uncle Sam offered low-interest mortgages to veterans with only $100 down. Even though I had a job, $100 still seemed like a lot. Back then, my no-frills Crackerbox house presented me with a boatload of opportunities to make improvements and upgrade the place. It had no fences, no lawns, and no patio. Inside there were 4 bare walls, cheap asphalt tile floors, and the government's standard one-coat, watered-down paint job. The Army doesn't teach much about fixing houses or home improvements, but I was eager to learn, and I had energy to spare. I'll admit, my qualifications for making home improvements were a bit skimpy when I started. But as I would quickly discover, guts and determination work wonders when you're brand spanking new and willing to learn. Almost every clerk and salesperson would give me advice when I purchased their materials. Not all of it was good, of course. Still, they helped me a lot, and besides, it was all free. Over the years, I've found there are lots of people willing to help you if you'll act a bit humble, maybe even a little dumb. Keep your mouth shut and allow folks to explain things to you. Sometimes when you appear confused, they'll explain things over and over again. When you're listening to the right people, you won't find a much better education. An excellent way to learn on the cheap is to drive around different neighborhoods where new construction, home building, is going on. You can go to school on the various stages of construction. Houses start with pouring the concrete foundation. Naturally, the rough plumbing will be laid in place before the concrete is poured if you wish to see how the sewer and water lines are laid out. House framing starts next if the house is to be constructed on the concrete slab. Otherwise, the subflooring will be built on top of wooden cross members called floor joists. I knew very little about house construction when I purchased my first rundown house. I found that driving around to local building sites during the various stages of construction provided a great education for me. I would recommend it to anyone who wants to learn. How to remedy a burping sink. I can still remember an early fix-up experience while upgrading a small bathroom, replacing the cabinets and sink. I was doing just fine installing my new vanity and Formica countertop. I even cut the hole nearly perfect for my shiny new oval sink. As I proceeded hooking up the drain and supply lines, everything was going like clockwork, until I turned on the water. It ran fine, but the drain seemed to be clogged up. It was making some very strange noises, glurg, 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 and then a couple of blurps. I took the drain line apart and checked for blockages. Found none, so I put it back together. My second test was more of the same. Glurg, 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 with even louder blurps. So much for my plumbing skills. Oh well, I still had my telephone job. Long story short, I drove out to a local subdivision, where 35 new houses were in various stages of construction. This time, I was zeroed in on finding a plumbing crew. My plan was to catch 'em eating lunch and just sort of wander in the house and find a bathroom so I could take a peek at the drain lines. Everything worked out like I planned, but the drain line looked almost exactly like mine. I still didn't have my answer. On the way out, I said, "Hi guys," to the plumbers. They returned my hi and even turned down their radio so they could hear me over the Doobie Brothers. Then I asked them, "Have you guys ever run into a sink that's not plugged up, but the water still won't go down? It just sits in the sink and gurgles?" "Have you checked out the vent?" they asked. "Vent? I don't think I have one." "Sure you do. Every sink has a vent." That was the last time I ever installed a sink without making sure it was properly vented. Before I leave the subject, allow me to make a couple of suggestions. When you visit the guys or gals working on new tract houses, think about what you're doing. Don't disrupt them when they're busy working. If you need to ask a question, try and make it really quick. These folks are paid to work, and if their boss is around, or should the boss drive up while you're talking to the workers, it might get them in trouble. My technique? I sort of wander around the general area, acting like I might be a potential home buyer before I ever approach any worker. I want to make sure the coast is clear, and if I do ask a question or two, I'll make it really quick, then move away. Remember, no boss likes to see the employee talking to someone instead of working. Lots of early morning shoppers just like me. It was my old GI tract house that would actually start me down the path to becoming a wealthy fixer-upper investor. Of course, I had lots to learn, but making improvements like building fences, pouring concrete patios, and adding a simple electric circuit was all the proof I needed that fixing things and making improvements were not beyond my capabilities. I will confess, some jobs like plumbing took me several attempts and multiple trips to the hardware stores before I could finally get the leaks stopped. I was sort of like an apprentice carpenter who cut the board 3 times and it was still too short. But as my skills improved, so did my confidence and self-esteem. In my own mind, there was nothing around my house I couldn't fix or improve. After a couple of years, I had the most over-improved, fixed-up house in my subdivision. A handyman without a cause. Friends of mine would often tell me, "Jay, you could make yourself some extra money doing stuff in the neighborhood like you've done to your house." I actually did a few jobs for friends, but it was never as satisfying as working on my own house. On top of that, I always billed my labor too cheaply because of friendships. Later in my career, I would correct that problem. Driving home from work one day, I went past an old duplex for sale. It took about a block for me to start thinking. I began to wonder, could this be my next step? Why not? A quick U-turn and I pulled over on the opposite side of the road. The duplex looked occupied, but it was absolutely a run-down-looking mess. Weeds had grown almost all the way up to the top of the front windows. What had been a cute little picket fence was still there, but it was lying flat on the ground. 2 junky automobiles were parked in the front yard, but one was definitely on the road less traveled. It was sitting on 4 concrete blocks with all the wheels missing. The paint on the duplex was still there, but wearing thin. It was a bluish, pukey-looking color, making the place look even uglier. Toward the backyard, about 20 feet from the duplex, was a double-car garage with no doors and a military camouflage tarp hanging from the roof. About now, it suddenly occurred to me, maybe I could use a second opinion. This place really looks rough. A little advice from my friends. Back then, I carpooled to work every day with 3 of my work buddies from the telephone company. Bright and early the next morning, I drove them by the duplex to get their opinions. It was totally a unanimous decision. They all agreed it was a pigsty, and they suggested I should never go near the place again. My work buddies told me, as tactfully as they could, they wouldn't touch the place with a 10-foot pole. "You'll lose your shirt," they said, "and maybe even your pants." This turned out to be a very valuable lesson, although I didn't realize it at the time. Seeking opinions from people who work for other people, employees, is probably the worst place in the world to ask for investment advice. I've pretty much concluded that most employees don't like to take many risks. There's an old saying that employees are the kind of people who feel a lot more at ease wearing both suspenders and a belt. In case one breaks, they still won't lose their pants. With my telephone buddies' advice still swirling around in my head, I decided to veto their vote. I had just enough daredevil in me to ignore their opinion and check out the deal a little further. I parked across the street so I could jot down a few notes on the hood of my pickup. I must have looked suspicious to one of the tenants because he wandered over and asked me what I was doing. He was big and ugly and sort of mean-looking. I must say, this was one time I was very thankful the property had a huge red and blue for sale sign mounted on the only fence post still standing. I quickly pointed to the sign and told him, Thought I'd just take a few notes about the property and write down the telephone number. Won't do you a damn bit of good, he mumbled. The stupid salesman ain't never brought nobody out here yet. Besides, the owner's an idiot, and I've already told him I'm moving. Hearing that, I can't tell you how much relief surged through my soul. I said a silent prayer right on the spot. Can you say hallelujah? It takes vision to see value in a pigsty. The duplex, which was for sale for $49,000, seemed way overpriced. But the owner said he would accept my skimpy $3,000 down payment offer and agreed to carry the financing himself. That meant no bank loans would be necessary, even though I had decent credit. At the time, I had no idea how important private financing would be for me. In years to follow, I would earn thousands of dollars with seller financing. I've written a good deal about interest earnings and buying back my own mortgage debt at substantial discounts in later chapters. You'll be blown away when you learn my private financing techniques. The duplex was at least 55 years old when I bought it. It had the old single-hung wood frame windows with lead weights hung on ropes dangling down the sides. The main electrical boxes had a combination modern-day breaker and those old glass screw-in type fuses. Both units were 2 bedrooms, with approximately 750 square feet of living space. My first real good look inside was after I was already the owner. In a way, I suppose that was good. Had I conducted a more serious inspection before the purchase, I'm not sure I'd have signed the closing papers. As you can probably guess, the inside of both units looked like pigsties. Over the years, I've learned this is pretty much the norm. If the property is trashy and looks terrible outside, you can bet your sweet bippy it's pretty much the same inside. My telephone company buddies and their families packed up on Labor Day and headed down the highway for Disneyland to celebrate the 3-day weekend. My part-time helper and I traveled down the very same highway, but we stopped a bit short at my newly acquired duplex. I had rented a small trailer, and we began the task of cleaning up, starting with the garage first. By the way, that ugly tenant I had talked to when I stopped to jot down the telephone number was gone. He hadn't bothered telling me he was being evicted and only had 5 more days left when we met. He made the deadline himself all right, but everything he owned was left in the duplex for me and my helper to haul away. After 3 days of hauling junk, removing abandoned cars, and trimming overgrown bushes, the place looked halfway respectable. Today, with countless jobs under my belt, I'm still amazed just how quickly a scumbag-looking property can be cleaned up and turned around. Almost anyone can do this without any special skills. I call it grunt work. On-the-job training will make you an expert. Consider risk versus potential reward. My transformation from doing home improvements and fixing stuff around my old GI house as a hobby to fixing houses for money happened because I was willing to step outside the box and take what I call a very limited risk. True, $3,000 wiped out my savings after purchasing the duplex. Still, I felt a huge opportunity was knocking at my door. Over the years, I've learned there's no such thing as a perfect real estate transaction, and, of course, none without a certain amount of risk. Even though I had confidence in myself, I've found it still takes a little blind faith and guts to push across the finish line. Countless wannabe investors attend seminars. They study investment books, even counsel with successful investors, and still can't muster up the courage to make their first buying decision. When you ask them why, they sort of mumble something like, "We're almost ready, just not quite yet." Although my $3,000 investment would eventually pay me back in the millions and might seem like a total no-brainer looking back now, it didn't seem nearly so clear at the time. Still, I remember thinking, the very worst that could happen would be the loss of my $3,000 cash and whatever additional money I would spend buying supplies for fix-up. Obviously, my personal labor would be lost too, but I was willing to chalk that up to experience for making the effort. Considering my potential losses, I would still have my telephone job, so I decided that if things didn't work out, I could eventually build up my savings again. To me, the opportunity seemed much bigger than whatever I could possibly lose. I've always felt that my willingness to contribute my personal hands-on labor sorta leveled the playing field with investors who had more money than me. I also figured that being somewhat familiar with fixin' stuff and my home improvements gave me a significant advantage buying run-down properties. Relying on the home improvement experiences I got from working on my old GI house gave me enough confidence, so I felt like there was nothing on any property I couldn't fix or at least halfway improve. I cannot overemphasize the tremendous advantage home improvement junkies have when they decide to use their hands-on experiences for building their personal wealth. Obviously, there's a lot more to learn, but the fastest and best education you'll ever receive anywhere is your hands-on participation. On-the-job training, we call it. Making $1 million from your hobby. There is a huge difference between improving one's personal house as a hobby and fixing up income-producing properties for money. Much of the effort is the same, but the results are as different as night and day. Fixing up your house will likely keep you broke forever, while fixing up income properties can make you a millionaire. Of course, I have no way of knowing it, but I would guess that many of the guys and gals I shop with Saturday mornings at the big box improvement store could very well have a millionaire hiding inside themselves. They just don't know it's there. Odds are some will follow in my footsteps, but I'd guess the potential millionaires number in the hundreds and perhaps thousands or more. Without knowing it, these folks have a giant head start toward creating real wealth and financial security for themselves and their families using many of the same skills they already possess. There are very few millionaire opportunities in our society today where a formal education is not required to become one. Those home improvement junkies standing in the checkout line on Saturday mornings at the big box improvement store are rare exceptions. The family that works together. I have written a great deal about how families are often drawn closer together with the idea of becoming financially better off as a real estate investment team. I've found when someone in the family catches the house fixin' bug, it can spread very rapidly to other family members. Soon they begin working and learning together. With proper encouragement, household members can learn to develop individual skills that help everyone in the family. Obviously, a tremendous start-out benefit can happen rather quickly by reducing the taxes paid on the family's regular income. A word to the wise here. Make certain you learn how to maximize deductions, depreciation, on your very first purchase. It's called setting up the books. Many newbies, including their hired tax preparers, don't get this right. They leave money on the table. Don't cheat yourself. Make sure your tax preparer understands investment real estate. Or call me, 530-223-2786. Earnings from rents are not taxed the same as wages from your regular job. Also, many everyday type expenses can be legally deducted from business and rental income. Quite often, ordinary investor expenses will greatly reduce or even eliminate personal taxes altogether. These ordinary expense deductions I refer to are not available to employees working at a regular wage-paying job. I have friends who pay from 25 to 30% of their total earnings for taxes. Think about how you could benefit by redirecting large tax payments to purchase income-producing properties for your personal benefit instead. This can be easily accomplished by families who learn about the benefits of investing together. Similar to a small mom-and-pop restaurant operation where the owner's grocery bill at home tends to be a lot less than that of his next-door neighbor working at the mill, there's even greater savings owning and operating investment real estate. That's because so many expenses that are normally paid from after-tax wages or salaries can now be legitimate tax write-offs deducted from investment income. Expenses like computers, telephones, vehicles, wages for family members, and home office space can now be paid from rental.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?